Hi guys! So I'm going to briefly mention this before people ask. This is not permanent, this is just a little bit of non-permanent pink hair dye that I thought would be a little bit of fun. So just before you wonder if I permanently dyed my hair pink, I have not on this occasion, but yeah, I'm quite enjoying it. I feel like I'm My Little Pony, and what more could I want from my hair? But the purpose of this video is of course to show you my BookTube TBR. So these are all books that I have specifically got on my TBR or purchased because of BookTube channels, but I haven't yet gotten around to reading. So I recently did a video called BookTube Made Me Read It, in which I talked about books I had read because of BookTube and enjoyed, and in this video I'm going to talk about books that I haven't read yet but want to read because people on BookTube have raved about them. So without further ado, let's get into the books. So first up, I'm going to mention one of the newest books on my TBR, and you probably saw it in a recent book haul, and that is When I Hit You by Mina Kandasamy. This book was shortlisted for the Women's Prize for Fiction, and although I'm always interested to see what is shortlisted for the Women's Prize for Fiction, it wasn't really in the forefront of my mind as a book I needed to pick up ASAP until I heard Simon talk about it over at Savage Reads. I actually talked to him about this one in person, but he's also reviewed it on his channel, and he loved this book. He completely sold me on it and made me feel like I needed to pick it up ASAP because it was on a really important topic and handled really well. It does deal with domestic abuse, and domestic abuse in a relationship that perhaps doesn't look abusive from the outside, as I'm sure is quite common. So I just think this one sounds so fascinating, moving and important, and I have Simon's recommendation that it is in fact a well executed, meaningful novel, so I am all the more excited to get to this one ASAP because of him. A book I was sure I had brought to London from Edinburgh but can't seem to find, so I'm going to have another look for it back when I'm in Edinburgh and check if I left it there. And that is Under the Skin by Michelle Faber. Michelle Faber in general is an author that I have felt like I should read because of Jen Campbell. Jen Campbell loves Michelle Faber, she's always raving about his books and she has really sold him to me and made me want to read him, and I've actually picked up 2 of his books on her recommendation, one of which is a sci-fi novel and the other is Under the Skin. And Under the Skin is the one I want to get to probably the soonest and I'm the most pumped about, and Jen particularly said that I would like. I'm not sure what that's saying because it's quite a dark story. It's about a woman that's driving around in a van, I think abducting men, and you don't know what's going on, and it's meant to be very dark. They did adapt it into a film with Scarlett Johansson, although I've heard the film is very different. It's also set in Glasgow, and it's always nice to read things set in places you're familiar, so I am really excited for this one. And the reason I thought I had it in London is because I'd put it in my suitcase because I wanted to read it very soon, but maybe I accidentally didn't, so I'm going to have to pick it back up when I'm up there next and read it. The next book is a piece of non-fiction, and that is Capitalist Realism by Mark Fisher. I picked this up because of Nicola over at Robotnik. I think I picked this up when she hauled it, or maybe it was when she reviewed it, but I remember as soon as I saw it on her channel I was really intrigued by it. It's now about capitalism as being accepted by the majority as just the standard and that there's no alternative, and Mark Fisher explores in this book kind of when that shift took place in the mindset of the world and how it perhaps isn't necessarily the only way of doing things. So as a socialist, this is obviously something that appeals to me. So when Nicola showed it on her channel and I saw that it was so tiny, I had to pick it up, although I have not read it despite it being so short, so this is something I should definitely get to in the near future. I don't know if the next book is slightly cheating because I'm currently halfway through it, and that is The Diviners by Libba Bray. I've actually seen this one kind of circulating the internet and BookTube for quite a few years, but it was Monica that pushed me to read this, much like it was Monica's fault that I read A Great and Terrible Beauty, and I talked about that in my BookTube Made Me Read It video. However, I know Monica loves this series, which begins with The Diviners, even more, and as soon as I mentioned that I had been enjoying A Great and Terrible Beauty, she immediately said to me that I had to pick up The Diviners, and I did purchase that at the time, but I'm only now getting around to reading it, and I can safely say I am adoring reading this as much as A Great and Terrible Beauty. This one is set in 1920s New York, and it follows a variety of characters, although we start with Evie, who is a young girl, 17-year-old girl from Ohio, who has been sent by her parents to live with her uncle, who owns a sort of occult museum in New York. and there's a lot of dark supernatural stuff going on. The next book I have to mention is poetry, an epic poem I believe, and that is Autobiography of Red by Anne Carson. This book I picked up because of Jason Purcell. I have read some of Anne Carson's non-fiction essays. Anne Carson is a classicist, and like I mentioned, I have read some of her essays during my studies. I have, however, never read any of her poetry, and she's quite the prolific poet with lots of poetry like this collection here, which is inspired by ancient myth. I'll just read you the first couple of sentences because I can't do this justice, but it says, "There is a strong mixture of whimsy and sadness in Gerion's story. He is tormented as a boy by his brother, escapes to a parallel world of photography, and falls in love with Heracles, a golden young man who leaves Gerion at the peak of infatuation." So you can already tell from those few sentences that we meet Heracles in these poems, and we follow the life of this character that Anne Carson has created. And Jason is constantly telling me that I need to read Anne Carson, and I am so sure that I am going to love this. Maybe it's because of that I haven't yet picked it up, but it is on my immediate TBR at the moment. The next book's a funny one because it was put on my TBR by one booktuber and was then bought for me by another booktuber, and that is Wicked by Gregory Maguire. This is the story before The Wizard of Oz as imagined by Gregory Maguire, and I'm sure you're all familiar with it from the stage musical that is incredibly popular, although I hear this book is in its own way very different from the stage musical. This came first and inspired the musical. It follows two of the witches that you meet in The Wizard of Oz, and I wanted to read this one because of Lena over at Just Kiss My Frog. She adores Wicked, I think the book and the musical, and she's always going on about it, and she very much sold me on the book and wanting to give it a shot. I've never seen the musical, so I can go into this fresh unless I end up seeing the musical before reading this. But I was then gifted this lovely, beautiful copy by Simon over at Savage Reads, which is a nice sort of roundabout there. We've got one booktuber recommends it, another booktuber gifted it to me, which I think is really nice. And now that I have my own copy, I don't really have any excuses, and I should get to this one very soon. The next book on my list is The Good Immigrant, edited by Nikesh Shukla and collecting together essays by various different authors, all focusing on the topic of immigration in the UK. Now, whose channel haven't I seen this book on? If I haven't seen someone review it, I feel like I've definitely seen them haul it. To name a few I can think of off the top of my head would include Caitlin from KUG, Lauren from Reads and Daydreams, Sana from Books and Quills, Lauren from Lauren in the Books, and there are many, many more. But all of that hype brought together got me so excited for this essay collection, and I still am despite having not read it yet. It has had rave reviews from booktubers I trust, but also in the more mainstream traditional media. I am certain this is probably going to be a 5-star read for me just based on everybody else's rave reviews. Another one that was just all over the internet was Homegoing by Yad Jassy. Again, to name a couple of channels I saw this one, there is Joss from Scribble Reads and Rincey from Rincey Reads. They both really enjoyed this book, and again, I've just seen it raved about everywhere. I've even had family members in my real life recommend this one to me, and it follows two sisters, one of whom is sold into slavery, the other becomes a slave trader's wife, and it follows both those sisters but then the subsequent generations of each of their families and how their families' lives change depending on which sister they were descended from. And just from the reviews it sounds amazing, like it has you completely absorbed, and such an interesting concept, so I am really excited for this one. We then have another book from the Women's Prize shortlist for 2018, and that is Home Fire by Camilla Shamsi. Now this one had been on my radar because it has been shortlisted and longlisted for various different literary prizes, including the Man Booker, now the Women's Prize, and various others in between. I also knew it was inspired by the Greek myth of Antigone, but it's also set in modern day and it deals with religious extremism. And again, all of that had been in the back of my mind. I'd seen it around, I'd been tempted to pick it up now and then, but I'd never done it. Not until Lauren from Reads and Daydreams reviewed it did I truly think, that's a book I need to read and I need to read it now. She just completely sold me on this book again. This is what booktubers do. They just result in this pile of books either piling up next to me physically or metaphorically in my head that I have to read. And she just really raved about this book in a way that made me want to read it. And then I have a book that was also gifted to me by a booktuber, but by an author I'd been wanting to read because of that same booktuber for quite some time, and that is Sunshine by Melissa Lee Houghton. This was a recommendation from Jen Campbell, who gave this to me as a gift, and Jen has been raving about Melissa Lee Houghton for years. And then this one was shortlisted for the Costa Poetry Award the year that Jen was judging, and subsequently, like I mentioned, Jen picked it up for me, and I do really need to read some of this author's poetry. I trust that Jen knows what kind of poetry I like at this point and would recommend me the right kind of poetry, and I'm also just always excited to read poetry that somebody else feels so passionate about. It says on the back, Sunshine is a new collection from next generation poet Melissa Lee Houghton. A writer of startling confession, her poems inhabit the lonely hotel rooms, psych wards and deserted lanes of austerity Britain. See? I love political poetry. Why haven't I read this yet? In fact, this is going to be the next collection of poetry I read. I'm going to take it with me today. One more book I'm going to mention though is The Bear and the Nightingale by Catherine Arden. This is a fantasy novel inspired by Russian fairy tales, I believe, and has a recommendation on the back from Robin Hobb and Naomi Novik, both fantasy authors that I enjoy, so I trust them, but it wasn't them that led me to buy this. In fact, I think two of the main channels I saw this on were Sana from Books and Quills and Anna from A Case for Books, who both really enjoyed this book. But those are some of the books that are on my TBR because of BookTube. Those are not the only books on there because of BookTube, and there are various books on there that I perhaps was considering picking up or was pushed to by BookTube, or perhaps never would have discovered because I wasn't a part of this community, which has also opened so many other avenues and channels through which I find book recommendations now. I mean, when I was a kid, the main way I discovered books was either my dad recommended them to me, or I went into a bookshop and just looked at the shelves until I found something that interested me. Now I am inundated with amazing recommendations and read so many books I love, and I'm really thankful to BookTube for that. But I'd love to hear what books are on your TBR list because of BookTube. Have I put any books on there? Who else has increased the size of your TBR pile? Let me know. Until next time though, happy reading, and I'll see you all again soon. Bye!